The mysterious patient. The space station floated silently in the vast emptiness of space. Inside its pristine medical wing, Dr. Zirak was busy preparing for his next patient. Zirak was Acceleran, a species known for their precision and deep knowledge of biology. His long, thin fingers moved quickly across the glowing console as he reviewed the medical records. But when he reached the next file, he froze. "A human," he muttered, his antennae twitching with curiosity. Humans were rare visitors on this station. They were a young species compared to most others in the galaxy, and their biology was still a puzzle to many scientists. Zirak had read reports of their resilience, but he found it hard to believe the stories. Now he had the chance to see one up close. Moments later, the doors slid open and the human entered. He was tall, with a strong but relaxed posture. His face carried a calm expression, but his eyes were sharp, observing every detail of the room. Zirak found himself staring for a moment before remembering his manners. "Welcome," Zirak said, his voice smooth and professional. "I am Dr. Zirak. Please, take a seat." The human nodded politely and introduced himself as Marcus. As they spoke, Zirak noticed small details about him. Scars on his hands, a slight limp, and a faint, almost invisible bruise near his temple. Yet Marcus spoke as if none of these things mattered. "I don't need much," Marcus said with a small smile. "Just a quick checkup. I've been traveling a lot, and I want to make sure everything's fine." Zirak nodded, beginning his examination. His instrument scanned Marcus's body, showing his vitals on the console. At first, everything seemed normal. But then, something caught Zirak's attention. "Your body temperature is lower than expected," Zirak said, frowning slightly. "Are you feeling cold?" Marcus laughed lightly. "Cold? No, this feels comfortable to me." Zirak tilted his head. Comfortable? The room was set to Acceleran standards, which were colder than what most species preferred. Yet Marcus showed no signs of discomfort. As the examination continued, Zirak noticed more unusual things. Marcus's muscles showed signs of heavy use, yet they seemed to recover faster than they should. His bones had microfractures that had healed perfectly, leaving only faint traces, and his heart rate was calm, steady, as if nothing could disturb him. When the examination ended, Zirak handed Marcus a thermal cover. "You should use this while sleeping," he said. "The station's temperature can drop at night." Marcus took the cover but didn't seem convinced. "Thanks, Doc. I'll keep it in mind." Later that night, Zirak couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. The human's resilience was unlike anything he had seen before. He decided to check on his patient one more time. Walking quietly to the sleeping quarters, Zirak peered inside. What he saw made him freeze in shock. Marcus was lying on the bed, completely uncovered. The thermal cover was folded neatly on a nearby chair. The room's temperature had dropped significantly, yet Marcus slept peacefully, his breath steady and even. Zirak stepped closer, his mind racing with questions. How could a human survive like this? Didn't they need warmth, like most species? He adjusted the room's temperature, just to be safe, but Marcus didn't even stir. Returning to his office, Zirak began reviewing everything he knew about human biology. But no matter how much he read, he couldn't find an explanation. Humans were supposed to be fragile, yet Marcus seemed almost indestructible. That night, Zirak couldn't sleep. The image of Marcus lying there, completely unaffected by the cold, stayed in his mind. For the first time in years, Zirak felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. Who was this human, and what secrets did his species hold? Zirak was determined to find out. Uncovering strange symptoms. The next morning, Dr. Zirak couldn't shake the image of Marcus sleeping without the thermal cover. His long fingers tapped rhythmically on the console as he reviewed the scanned results from the previous night. The readings were strange, almost inconsistent. Marcus's core temperature had remained stable throughout the night, even though the room had dropped to a level that would send most patients into early hypothermia. Maybe the scanner malfunctioned, Zirak muttered, though he didn't believe it. The station's medical equipment was state-of-the-art, calibrated for accuracy across hundreds of species. A malfunction was unlikely. A soft chime at the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus stepped inside, stretching his arms casually, as if he had just returned from a vacation, not a freezing cold room. "Morning, Doc," Marcus greeted, flashing a relaxed smile. "Sleep well." Zirek's antennae twitched slightly. Why was the human asking him if he slept well? "I slept adequately," Zirek replied carefully. His eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus's movements. There was no stiffness, no shivering. It was as if Marcus hadn't even noticed the cold. "Did you use the thermal cover I provided?" Zirek asked, already knowing the answer. Marcus scratched the back of his head, looking sheepish. No, I didn't need it. Honestly, it felt kind of nice." Zirak blinked slowly. "Kind of nice." The Celerin doctor pulled out his handheld scanner, gesturing for Marcus to sit on the examination table. "I would like to run a few additional tests, if you don't mind," Zirak said, keeping his voice neutral. "Sure thing. You're the doc." Marcus hopped onto the table, swinging his legs slightly as he waited. Zirak began the scan, this time with heightened focus. The handheld device hummed softly, projecting a faint blue light over Marcus's chest and shoulders. The results flickered onto the screen, and what Zirak saw made him pause. ***, the human's internal temperature was perfectly normal. ***, normal by human standards at least. But his muscle fibers showed signs of microscopic tearing, the kind seen in species that had undergone extreme physical exertion. Yet Marcus showed no outward signs of pain. "Do you experience muscle soreness or fatigue?" Zirak asked, his brow furrowing. Marcus shrugged. "Sometimes. I figure it's just part of life." Zirak leaned closer, tilting the scanner to examine Marcus's arm. "You have microfractures along your forearm bone. Were you aware of this?" Marcus glanced at his arm, flexing it slightly. "Oh, that? Yeah, that happened a few months back. It healed fine, though." Zirak stared at him, baffled. The fractures were not fully healed. The bone was still in the process of regenerating. Any other species would have required weeks in a medical pod for such injuries. Most patients would be in significant discomfort with these kinds of fractures, Zirak said, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. "How did you manage without medical intervention?" Marcus chuckled lightly. "Humans are pretty good at dealing with stuff. We get hurt, we heal. That's just how it is." Zirak wasn't satisfied with that answer. "Your scans also show traces of internal scarring, injuries to your ribs, possibly from blunt force trauma. Were you involved in combat or an accident?" Zirak asked. Marcus's expression didn't change, but there was a brief pause before he answered. "A bit of both, I guess. I used to do some heavy work back on Earth. Things happen." Zirak set the scanner down, folding his arms as he regarded Marcus with growing interest. "Your physiology appears to endure far more than most species. Does this level of recovery apply to all humans?" Marcus smiled again, but this time there was something else in his eyes, something deeper. "Yeah, we're tougher than we look," Marcus said. "Humans, we adapt. Our environments back home aren't exactly forgiving. Earth can be a pretty wild place." Zirak made a note in his datapad. Adapt. That word seemed to define Marcus more than anything else. Still, something didn't sit right with Zirak. "You mentioned Earth. Could you elaborate? What makes it so wild?" Marcus laughed. "Oh, we've got deserts, frozen tundras, jungles, oceans. You name it, we've got it. Sometimes you just have to push through. If you stop moving, the world doesn't wait for you to catch up." Zirek's gaze lingered on Marcus as he processed this information. Celerins, like many species, thrived in stable, controlled environments. The idea of constantly battling nature to survive was foreign to him. "You said something just now," Zarak began carefully. "You push through, even when it's difficult." Marcus's grin widened. "That's how humans work. We survive. We don't always have the best tools, but we find a way. Pain, cold, heat. It's all part of the deal." Zarak sat back, quietly stunned. He had treated patients from dozens of worlds, but never had he encountered a species so casual about pain and survival. "I would like to monitor you for a few more days," Zarak finally said. "Purely for academic purposes, of course." Marcus gave him a thumbs up. "No problem, Doc. Just let me know if you need more samples or whatever." As Marcus left the room, Zarak stared at the data on his console. His mind raced with questions, but one thought kept rising to the surface. Humans were not just survivors. They were anomalies, walking mysteries wrapped in unassuming smiles, testing human limits. Dr. Zarak couldn't let it go. Marcus's scans, his strange tolerance for cold, and the microfractures in his bones, all of it gnawed at Zarak's scientific curiosity. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about understanding humans as a whole. In the sterile calm of the medical bay, Zarak paced, reviewing data and setting up a new series of non-invasive tests. He told himself it was purely professional. This was research, nothing more. When Marcus returned later that afternoon, he leaned casually against the doorway. "You're staring at that scanner like it owes you money, Doc." Marcus smirked, crossing his arms. "What's next?" "More scans." Zarak's antennae twitched in amusement. "Something like that. I'd like to perform a series of tests. Light, temperature, and pressure. Nothing invasive, I assure you." Marcus gave a playful shrug. "Sure. Why not? I'm curious to see what else you can find." Zarak led Marcus to a different part of the medical bay, a sterile, circular chamber designed for species acclimation testing. The room's environment could shift between extremes, simulating conditions from across the galaxy. As Marcus stepped inside, Zarak activated the console, setting the temperature to a balmy 30 degrees Celsius. "Comfortable?" Zarak asked. Marcus stretched and yawned. "Feels like a summer day back home." "Interesting." Zarak made a note. Most species would find this heat stifling, but Marcus barely reacted. The temperature dropped steadily to 15 degrees. Marcus barely blinked. 10 degrees. Still no reaction. At 5 degrees, Zarak expected at least a shiver, but Marcus simply crossed his arms and whistled softly. "Is this the part where I'm supposed to feel cold?" Marcus teased. Zarak narrowed his eyes. "You tell me. Most species begin to feel discomfort at this point." Marcus chuckled. "Doc, this is nothing. I've camped in worse without a tent." Zarak pressed a button, dropping the temperature to 0. Frost formed along the chamber's edges. Marcus's breath became visible, yet his posture remained unchanged. "I used to hike in sub-zero weather back on Earth," Marcus added, watching Zarak closely. "Ever heard of the Arctic?" Zarak tapped his console. "I am familiar with the region. It is inhospitable." Marcus grinned. "It's home to some folks. Tough people." At -5, most species required emergency thermal coverings. Marcus only shifted his stance, casually rubbing his hands together. "I see no sign of stress or muscle tension," Zarak said aloud, more to himself than to Marcus. "Your body adjusts remarkably well to the cold." Marcus grinned. "Humans are weird like that." Zarak didn't stop there. He pushed the temperature to -10. Finally, Marcus inhaled deeply. "All right, yeah. I feel that." Zarak's antennae twitched in excitement. "Fascinating. But you do not appear distressed." "It's cold," Marcus admitted, "but not unbearable." Zarak halted the test, slowly returning the room to normal temperature. Marcus stepped out, casually brushing frost from his arms, as if he had just walked through light snowfall. The results were baffling. You tolerated temperatures that would incapacitate most species, Zirek remarked, reviewing the data. Is this typical for humans? Marcus shrugged. Depends. Some people handle it better than others. I guess I'm one of the lucky ones. Zirek wasn't convinced. I'd like to perform one more test, this time involving physical pressure and endurance. Marcus raised a brow, but didn't object. Sure. What's the worst that could happen? Zirek led him to a different chamber, this one designed to simulate gravitational shifts. We will gradually increase the gravity to see how your body adapts, Zirek explained. Marcus stepped inside. The baseline gravity matched Earth's, but Zirek began increasing it slowly. At 1.2 times Earth's gravity, Marcus rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles. Feeling heavier, he admitted, but nothing crazy. 1.5 times. Marcus exhaled, his movement slowing, but he adjusted quickly. At 2 times gravity, sweat began forming on his forehead. But he powered through, moving with deliberate effort. This is new, Marcus said, gritting his teeth slightly. Zirek watched with fascination. Most species experience muscle strain at this level. Your muscles appear to compensate efficiently. By 2.5 times gravity, Marcus's breathing deepened. He crouched slightly, planting his feet firmly. You can stop any time, Zirek offered. Marcus shook his head. I want to see how far I can go. Zirek was beginning to understand something critical about humans. They didn't just survive. They actively sought out challenges. At 3 times gravity, Marcus finally raised a hand. All right, that's enough. Zirek deactivated the simulation, watching as Marcus stepped out, breathing hard but standing tall. That, Marcus said, wiping his brow, was intense. Zirek offered him a hydration packet, observing closely as Marcus downed the liquid. You willingly endured far more than necessary, Zirek commented, unable to hide his curiosity. Why? Marcus smiled, leaning against the wall. Humans like to push limits, Doc. Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of until you test yourself. Zirek nodded slowly, taking in the words. Humans weren't just survivors. They were explorers of their own potential. As Marcus left the medical bay, Zirek made another note in his datapad. Species 8472, human, possesses extreme adaptability, resilience, and an unusual willingness to challenge their own physical limits. Further observation is required. Possible anomaly, or the new standard of galactic endurance. The warriors passed. Dr. Zirek sat at his desk, eyes fixed on the holographic scans flickering in front of him. Marcus's test results lined the screen. Cold tolerance, gravity endurance, and muscle resilience. It all told the same story. Humans were more than tough. They were anomalies wrapped in soft skin and casual smiles. Zirek leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Most species he treated followed predictable biological patterns. The stronger they appeared, the more fragile they often were beneath the surface. Marcus was the opposite. Outwardly unremarkable, but internally layered with scars and silent endurance. Curiosity gnawed at him. There was more to Marcus than his physiology. Zirek could see it in the human's eyes, a quiet, hardened wisdom that hinted at something deeper. Later that evening, Zirek requested Marcus return to the medbay. The human arrived just as casually as always, hands stuffed in the pockets of his jacket. You're starting to make me think I live here, Marcus joked as he stepped inside. Zirek gestured to a seat. You have been quite cooperative. I appreciate your patience. Marcus sat down, stretching his legs out in front of him. No problem. It's been kind of fun, actually. Not every day I get poked and prodded by an alien doctor. Zirek gave a small nod but paused for a moment. His curiosity finally spilled over. Marcus, Zirek began carefully, folding his hands on the desk. If you are comfortable, I would like to know more about your past. Your body tells a story, but I feel I am missing the details. Marcus raised a brow, but his easygoing expression didn't falter. My past. Yes, Zirek said, tapping at the scans. The microfractures, the internal scarring. These are not accidents one acquires casually. They suggest conflict. For a brief moment, Marcus's gaze shifted. His smile faded, replaced by something distant. You're not wrong, Marcus said quietly. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. I've been through a few things. Zirek remained silent, allowing Marcus the space to continue. I used to serve in Earth's military, Marcus explained. His voice was calm, but Zirek noticed how his hands tightened slightly. Spent a few years in rough places, war zones, disaster areas, places where life didn't come easy. Zirek's antennae lowered slightly in respect. Military service. That explains some of the injuries. Marcus nodded. Yeah, the ribs. That was from a blast wave. Shrapnel hit the armor I was wearing and threw me halfway across the field. The arm fractures. Fell from a transport vehicle under fire. Braced my fall the wrong way. Zirek's gaze sharpened as he studied Marcus closely. You survived these. Encounters without enhanced medical intervention. Marcus chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. Oh, I got patched up, but on Earth, sometimes you just have to walk it off. Our tech isn't as advanced as what you've got here. Walk it off. Zirek couldn't decide if Marcus was joking or serious. You said humans push their limits, Zirek said, recalling their earlier conversation. Is this standard practice? Marcus tilted his head thoughtfully. Maybe. For soldiers, yeah. We're trained to adapt. Pain is part of the job. Zirek found himself leaning closer. And the cold tolerance. The gravity endurance. Marcus smiled again, but it was softer now. Doc, Earth isn't a gentle place. We've got deserts that can cook you alive, mountains that freeze you to the bone, and oceans that'll swallow you whole. You learn to deal with it. It's just life. Zirek sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Marcus's words. To Marcus, this was normal. Your resilience, it is unlike anything I have encountered, Zirek admitted. I have treated warriors from a dozen worlds, but none speak of hardship so casually. Marcus's eyes softened. You know, Doc, I think that's what makes humans different. We don't just survive. We get used to the struggle. We grow around it. Zirek tapped his console, bringing up a visual map of Earth. The rotating globe displayed vast deserts, frozen poles, and dense jungles. This world of yours, Zirek murmured, tracing the map with his finger. It is harsh. Marcus nodded. Yeah, but it's home. Zirek paused, choosing his next words carefully. Do you regret your experiences, the scars you carry? Marcus thought for a moment before shaking his head. No, they're part of me. They remind me that I've been through worse and made it out the other side. Zirek watched him for a long moment before standing up. He walked over to a cabinet and retrieved a small circular device. It pulsed softly with a faint blue light. I would like to give you this, Zirek said, offering the device to Marcus. Marcus took it, examining the object curiously. What is it? A regenerative booster, Zirek explained. It accelerates cellular repair. It is not much, but it may ease some of the lingering pain from your injuries. Marcus looked down at the device, then back at Zirek, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Thanks, Doc, Marcus said, his voice warm. I appreciate it. As Marcus left the med bay, Zirek returned to his desk, staring once more at the holographic scans. Humans weren't just survivors. They were warriors shaped by a world that demanded nothing less. And Zirek had a feeling there was still much more to learn. The unexpected crisis. The space station hummed quietly, its corridors bathed in soft, sterile light. Dr. Zirek sat at his console, reviewing the latest reports from across the station. Everything seemed routine, until a sudden tremor shook the floor beneath his feet. Zirek's head snapped up. His antennae twitched sharply, picking up distant alarms echoing through the halls. Red emergency lights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the medbay. "What in the stars?" Zirak muttered, already rising from his chair. His console flashed with a critical alert. Temperature control malfunction. Cryo wing. Zirak's eyes narrowed. The cryo wing housed several patients in delicate recovery, including species that required strict thermal regulation to survive. A failure there could be catastrophic. Without hesitation, Zirak grabbed his medical kit and sprinted toward the cryo wing. As he approached, he saw a team of station engineers frantically working at the control panels outside the sealed chamber. "What happened?" Zirak demanded, stopping beside them. "Cooling systems overloaded," one of the engineers growled, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's dropping fast, already down to -15 degrees. The thermal regulators aren't responding." Zirak's mind raced. Several patients inside were sensitive to even minor shifts in temperature. If the system wasn't stabilized soon, they wouldn't survive. "Override the failsafe manually," Zirak ordered. The engineer shook his head. "It's not that simple. The main controls are offline. We're locked out." Zirak's gaze shifted to the frosted glass of the cryo wing doors. Inside, faint silhouettes of patients were visible, lying in their pods as frost crept across the surfaces. He couldn't waste time. Zirak was about to request full quarantine when he heard familiar footsteps behind him. "Need a hand, Doc?" Marcus stood there, dressed casually as always, but his sharp eyes scanned the situation with quiet understanding. "This isn't your concern," Zirak began, but Marcus had already stepped forward, peering through the glass at the freezing room. "You've got patients in there," Marcus said, his voice steady. "They won't make it, will they?" Zirak hesitated. "If we cannot stabilize the temperature." "No, they won't." Marcus nodded slowly, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off invisible tension. "Then let's fix it." Before Zirak could object, Marcus pressed the manual release on the cryo wing doors. A loud hiss followed as freezing air burst from the chamber. Frost clung to Marcus's clothes, but he stepped inside without hesitation. "Marcus, stop," Zirak called out. "You'll freeze." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, flashing a grin. "Doc, I've camped in worse." Zirak stood frozen for a moment, uncertain whether to call security or trust Marcus's strange confidence. Ultimately, he chose the latter. Marcus walked deeper into the chamber, his breath curling in the freezing air. Patients lay in cryopods, their life signs flickering faintly on nearby monitors. Marcus moved between them with practiced ease, his fingers checking seals and reinforcing thermal barriers by hand. Zirak watched from the entrance, barely believing his eyes. Marcus wasn't just enduring the cold, he was thriving in it. Several minutes passed before Marcus emerged, steam rising from his clothes as the warmth of the corridor enveloped him. "All secured," Marcus announced casually. "Some of those pods were leaking heat. I patched them up as best as I could." Zirak scanned the patients. Their vitals had stabilized. A wave of relief washed over him. "You willingly expose yourself to extreme temperatures," Zirak said, disbelief still lingering in his voice. "Most species would have succumbed within minutes." Marcus shrugged. "It wasn't that bad. I've been through worse blizzards on Earth." Zirak stared at Marcus for a long moment. This human had once again defied logic. "Marcus," Zirak began carefully, "what drives you to do this? You had no obligation to assist. You could have left this matter to the station staff." Marcus crossed his arms, leaning casually against the wall. "Back on Earth, we look out for each other. Doesn't matter if it's a neighbor or a stranger, you help when you can. Out here, I guess it's not much different." Zirak absorbed the words, finding them unexpectedly profound. "You are remarkably selfless," Zirak said quietly. "Few species exhibit such behavior without incentive." Marcus grinned. "I think humans just don't like leaving things half done. We've got this thing about stubbornness." Zirak's antennae twitched in thought. Stubbornness, another human trait that seemed both baffling and admirable. As the alarms finally silenced and the engineers secured the failing systems, Zirak updated his medical logs. Marcus's actions had prevented casualties, and in doing so, had revealed yet another layer of the complex puzzle that was humanity. Before Marcus left, Zirak stopped him with a final question. If the situation had worsened, if you had been at risk of serious harm, would you still have gone inside? Marcus met Zirak's gaze, his expression soft but unwavering. Yeah, Marcus said simply. Because someone had to. Zirak watched him walk away, realizing that Marcus's resilience wasn't just physical, it was something far deeper. Human strength, it seemed, wasn't just in their bodies. It was in their hearts, a lesson in strength. The Creo wing had stabilized, but Dr. Zirak couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. Marcus's actions defied everything Zirak knew about survival instincts. Most species, when faced with life-threatening cold, prioritized self-preservation. Marcus, however, had done the opposite. It was the kind of behavior Zirak often read about in human historical files, accounts of explorers trudging through frozen wastelands, soldiers standing guard through brutal winters, and even ordinary people braving dangerous conditions to rescue others. But reading about such stories was one thing. Watching it unfold in front of him was something entirely different. Zirak requested Marcus return to the med bay for a follow-up exam, though the reason was more personal curiosity than medical necessity. Marcus arrived, as usual, with his hands casually tucked into his jacket pockets. No more freezing rooms, right? Marcus joked, stepping inside. Zirak's antennae twitched. Not today, though I imagine you wouldn't complain. Marcus grinned. Depends. Got any snowstorms you need me to walk through? Zirak gestured to the examination chair. Marcus sat down, and Zirak began the scans. His vitals were perfectly normal. No signs of frostbite, nerve damage, or muscle strain. Nothing to indicate Marcus had spent nearly 15 minutes in sub-zero temperatures without proper gear. Your readings are consistent, Zirak said, puzzled. It is as if the exposure to cold left no mark on your body. Marcus shrugged. I told you, Doc. Cold's not a big deal where I'm from. Zirak frowned, lowering the scanner. But why? Why does your species possess this kind of resilience? Marcus leaned back in the chair, tapping his fingers lightly on the armrest. It's hard to explain. I guess it comes down to how we're raised. Earth isn't exactly gentle, you know. You grow up learning how to handle tough conditions. Doesn't matter if it's weather, work, or war. Humans adapt because we have to. Zirak listened intently. I understand the biological aspect of adaptation, but this seems to extend beyond simple survival. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, I think that's the part you can't measure with a scanner. Zirak set the scanner aside and leaned forward. Then explain it to me. I wish to understand. Marcus exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting as if searching for the right words. You ever hear of Shackleton? Marcus asked. Zirak's antennae twitched. The name is unfamiliar. Marcus smiled faintly. He was an explorer from Earth, about 500 years ago. Led an expedition to Antarctica, one of the coldest places on the planet. His ship got stuck in ice. The crew was stranded for months in freezing temperatures with almost no supplies. But Shackleton kept them alive. They walked for miles across the ice, starved, frozen, but they made it. Not a single crew member died. Zirak's eyes narrowed slightly. And what does this Shackleton represent to your people? Marcus's expression grew serious. Perseverance, leadership, grit. The idea that even when things seem impossible, you keep moving forward. Because if you stop, you're done for. Zirak absorbed this, feeling an unfamiliar weight in Marcus's words. And you believe this mindset is universal among humans? Zirak asked carefully. Marcus smiled softly. Not always. But it's part of who we are. We're stubborn, Doc. Sometimes that gets us into trouble, but sometimes it's the only reason we survive. Zirak was beginning to understand. It wasn't just biological resilience that defined Marcus. It was something deeper, a strength that couldn't be quantified by muscle density or cellular regeneration. You willingly endured freezing temperatures to help patients you had never met, Zirak said. You speak of perseverance as if it is second nature. Marcus's eyes softened. I think humans know that sometimes the hardest part isn't surviving the cold. It's keeping the fire inside from going out. Zirak remained silent, reflecting on the sentiment. This was strength beyond physiology. Marcus, Zirak began quietly, do you believe this? Fire is unique to your species. Marcus chuckled. I think everyone's got it in some way, Doc. But yeah, humans tend to lean into it pretty hard. Zirak's antennae lowered slightly in thought. As the scan concluded, Zirak handed Marcus a data tablet. I have compiled the results of your tests. They reflect exceptional resilience. Perhaps one day, I will have a better understanding of what drives it. Marcus accepted the tablet, glancing at the screen. I appreciate it, Doc. But if you really want to understand humans, you can't just rely on tests. Zirak tilted his head. Then what should I do? Marcus smiled. Spend more time around us. Watch how we handle things, how we pull each other up when things get tough. You'll learn more that way than any scanner can tell you. Zirak nodded slowly. Perhaps Marcus was right. As Marcus left the med bay, Zirak watched him disappear down the corridor. In his datapad, Zirak wrote the simple note. Humans are not defined by their physical endurance alone, but by their ability to endure even when the odds are against them. I believe this is what truly sets them apart. The final revelation. Dr. Zirak sat alone in his office, the soft hum of the space station barely noticeable beneath his racing thoughts. Marcus's words echoed in his mind. The hardest part isn't surviving the cold. It's keeping the fire inside from going out. For days, Zirak had reviewed every scan, every test result, and every observation he had made of the human. The data told one story, but Marcus's actions told another. The patient's records had been simple: routine injuries, mild cold exposure, nothing that justified deeper study. But Marcus had proven time and time again that the surface rarely reflected the truth. Zirak activated the holographic display in front of him. Marcus's biosignature appeared, glowing faintly against the dark backdrop. Stable, resilient, unremarkable on paper. But Zirak knew better now. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door to the med bay slid open, and Marcus stepped inside, carrying a small metallic box under his arm. You called for me, Doc, Marcus said casually, setting the box down on the examination table. Zirak gestured to a chair. I wanted to discuss your results. And something more. Marcus raised a brow, but sat down without hesitation. All right. Hit me with it. Zirak folded his hands, studying Marcus for a long moment before speaking. Your physical resilience is remarkable, but I believe it is not the most defining aspect of your strength. Marcus tilted his head. Oh, what is then? Zirak leaned forward slightly. Your mind, your will. I have observed many species that possess physical endurance, but few demonstrate the same capacity for perseverance. Marcus smiled faintly. I figured you'd say something like that. Zirak's antennae twitched. You anticipated this. Marcus chuckled, crossing his arms. Doc, humans have a habit of being underestimated. You're not the first to think there's more to us than meets the eye. Zirak sat back, considering the statement. Why is that? Why do humans cultivate such strength of spirit? Marcus thought for a moment, his eyes distant. Because we have to. Earth's not a paradise, Doc. It's beautiful, sure, but it's tough. You grow up knowing that if you want to make it, you need to keep going, no matter what. Zirak listened intently, feeling as if he was finally beginning to grasp the essence of Marcus's species. "There's something I don't think you can measure with scans," Marcus continued. "It's the ability to get back up after falling. It's not just about muscle or endurance. It's about refusing to stay down, even when everything feels impossible." Zirak's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "You describe resilience as if it is a philosophy rather than a biological trait." Marcus nodded. "In a way, yeah. Every human carries that with them. Some more than others, but it's there." Silence settled between them for a moment, but Marcus's gaze shifted toward the metallic box he had brought. "I'd brought you something," Marcus said, tapping the box lightly. Zirak arched a brow. "A gift." "Sort of. It's a piece of earth." Marcus opened the box, revealing a small, clear case containing an ordinary rock, gray, jagged, and unremarkable. Zirak leaned in curiously. "A stone." Marcus grinned. "Not just any stone. This is from Everest, one of the highest mountains on Earth. Climbers risk their lives to reach the top. Some don't make it, but the ones who do, they leave something behind and take something like this with them." Zirak stared at the rock, feeling a strange reverence for the object. "Why do they risk their lives for this?" Marcus's smile softened. "Because standing at the top means you pushed past everything trying to stop you. The wind, the cold, the exhaustion. When you reach the summit, it's not about the view. It's about proving to yourself that you could do it." Zirak carefully picked up the case, holding it as if it were fragile. This simple rock carried the weight of human perseverance. "I am beginning to understand," Zirak said quietly. Marcus stood, stretching his arms. "Keep it. Maybe one day you'll visit Earth and see for yourself." Zirak watched Marcus leave, the small rock still resting in his hands. In his notes, Zirak added one final entry. "Humans are more than biological anomalies. Their strength lies not in their bodies, but in their spirit, the unrelenting fire that drives them to climb even the highest peaks. I believe this will take them further than any other species has ever gone." As the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Zirak placed the Everest stone on his desk, a quiet reminder of the lessons he had learned.